Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of America's most terrifying unsolved mysteries. A case that paralyzed an entire city with fear and remains unsolved to this day. This is the story of the Axeman of New Orleans, a serial killer who emerged from the shadows in 1918 and left a trail of blood, cryptic messages, and unanswered questions that would haunt Louisiana for generations. Stay with us as we explore the brutal murders, the mysterious letters, and the chilling possibility that this killer was never caught. This is the Axeman of New Orleans. Part 1. The First Victim. The year was 1918. New Orleans was a city of jazz, mystery, and dark secrets. But on the night of May 23rd, everything changed. A family named Maggio lay sleeping in their home, completely unaware that their lives would soon be forever altered by an act of unimaginable violence. Joseph Maggio, a barber by trade, was awakened by a sound that would be his last. In the darkness of his bedroom, something moved, something twisted and sinister. Before he could even comprehend what was happening, a razor-sharp blade sliced through the air. Joseph's wife, Catherine, screamed as blood sprayed across the white sheets of their marital bed. The attacker was relentless, violent, and possessed with a rage that seemed almost inhuman. When the police arrived the next morning, they found a scene of absolute carnage. Joseph Maggio lay dead, his body mutilated by an axe that had been taken from somewhere in the house. Catherine survived, but was severely wounded, her face and body bearing the scars of the brutal assault. The killer had left behind the murder weapon, the family's own axe, but had vanished into the humid New Orleans night without a trace. The police questioned neighbors, family members, and anyone who might have seen something. But no one had witnessed the attack. No one had seen the killer's face. It was as if a phantom had descended upon the city, committed an act of unspeakable violence, and simply disappeared. Part 2. The pattern emerges. For several weeks, New Orleans returned to its normal rhythm. The Maggio murder remained unsolved, filed away with dozens of other cases that the police department struggled to manage. But the killer wasn't finished. Not even close. On June 6, 1918, just 2 weeks after the Maggio attack, another family went to sleep believing they were safe in their own home. This family, the Bessmers, had no idea that their sense of security was about to be shattered forever. Again, the killer struck in the dead of night. Again, the weapon was an axe. Again, the violence was swift and brutal, but this time there was something different. The killer had used a straight razor as well, inflicting additional wounds that suggested a level of sadism and control that went beyond simple rage. The attack was deliberate, calculated, and deeply disturbing. Anna Bessmers survived the attack, but she was traumatized. She spoke of hearing footsteps, of a presence in her bedroom, of the sudden, violent assault that came without warning. Like the Maggio case, the killer had vanished into thin air. The police now faced a terrifying reality. They had a serial killer on their hands. Someone was methodically hunting families in their own homes using axes and razors to commit acts of violence that seemed almost ritualistic in nature. The question that haunted every law enforcement official in New Orleans was simple but terrifying. Who was he? And where would he strike next? Part 3. A city descends into fear. As the summer of 1918 progressed, the attacks continued. June 27th brought another brutal assault. July 5th brought another. The killer seemed to have an almost supernatural ability to find his victims, slip into their homes undetected, and commit his violent acts with a chilling precision. The newspapers called him the Axeman. The name stuck, and soon it was whispered in every corner of New Orleans. Mothers locked their doors and windows obsessively, checking them multiple times before bed. Families slept with weapons by their sides, ready to defend themselves against the unknown threat that prowled the darkness. But the Axeman seemed to have no pattern. He struck in different neighborhoods. He targeted different types of families. Some victims were wealthy, others were working class. Some were Italian immigrants, others were American-born. It was impossible to predict where he would strike next, and this unpredictability only amplified the terror that gripped the city. Gun sales skyrocketed. Residents purchased firearms and ammunition at an unprecedented rate, determined that if the Axeman came for them, they would be ready. Hotels reported an increase in occupancy, as families too terrified to stay in their homes sought refuge in establishments they believed to be safer. The social fabric of New Orleans was unraveling under the weight of collective fear. Churches were packed with people praying for protection. Religious leaders spoke of demons and evil forces. Some residents began to believe that the Axeman was not entirely human, that he possessed some kind of supernatural power that allowed him to move unseen and strike without warning. The rational mind struggled to comprehend what was happening. Part 4. The Mysterious Letters. Then, on March 13th, 1919, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at the offices of a New Orleans newspaper. The sender identified himself only as the Axeman. What followed was a message that would baffle investigators and captivate the public imagination for decades to come. The letter was crude and poorly written, filled with grammatical errors and odd phrasing that suggested either poor education or an attempt to disguise the writer's true intelligence. But the content was absolutely chilling. The Axeman claimed to be a supernatural entity, a being from another realm who took pleasure in blood and violence. He spoke in a strangely poetic manner about his crimes and his intentions. But there was something else in the letter that caught everyone's attention. The Axeman made a specific request. He demanded that on a particular night, New Orleans residents play jazz music in their homes. If they complied, he promised to spare them. If they refused, he promised to visit them with his axe. The letter was signed with a cryptic symbol and a name that would echo through the ages: the Axeman of New Orleans. The city didn't know how to respond. Was this a genuine threat from the killer, or was it a hoax? Should they take it seriously, or dismiss it as the ramblings of a madman? Debates raged in newspapers, on street corners, and in homes throughout New Orleans. Remarkably, on the night the Axeman specified, the city responded. Jazz music poured from windows and doors throughout New Orleans. The sound of saxophones, trumpets, and pianos filled the humid night air. It was an eerie, surreal scene, an entire city playing music in the hopes of appeasing a serial killer. Remarkably, there were no attacks that night. Whether this was because the Axeman honored his promise or simply chose not to strike, no one would ever know. But the incident only deepened the mystery surrounding the killer and added another layer of terror to the already frightened population. Part 5. More murders, more questions. The attacks continued sporadically throughout 1919. Some nights the Axeman would strike. Other nights, he would vanish for weeks at a time. The pattern was so irregular that investigators struggled to build a coherent profile of their suspect. One particularly brutal attack occurred on August 10th, 1919. A man named Steve Boca was attacked in his bedroom by someone wielding an axe and a straight razor. He survived, but was severely wounded. Like other victims, he reported that he had heard nothing before the attack, felt no presence in his room, and could not identify his attacker. By this point, dozens of people had been attacked. Several had been murdered. The city was in a state of near panic. Businesses suffered as people avoided going out after dark. The psychological toll on the population was immense. Parents struggled to help their children sleep at night. Adults suffered from insomnia and anxiety. Trust in the police department eroded as the killer remained at large. Part 6. The Investigation and False Leads. The police conducted an investigation that was, by the standards of the time, relatively thorough. They interviewed suspects, followed leads, and attempted to establish connections between victims. But nothing seemed to stick. For every piece of evidence that pointed in one direction, there was another that suggested a completely different theory. Some investigators believed the Axeman was a lone killer, a madman driven by impulses that defied rational explanation. Others thought there might be multiple killers working together, a group bound by shared perversions and a mutual desire to terrorize the city. Still others entertained the possibility that the attacks were somehow connected to organized crime, that the Axeman was an enforcer for one of New Orleans' criminal organizations. One popular theory focused on Italian immigrants and the mafia. Some of the victims were Italian, and some investigators believed the killings might be related to mob activity. But this theory was never substantiated, and it played into existing prejudices against Italian immigrants that were unfortunately common at the time. Several suspects were arrested and interrogated. Some were eventually released due to lack of evidence. Others confessed under pressure, only to recant their confessions later. The police department, frustrated and under intense public pressure, made several dramatic arrests that turned out to be dead ends. Part 7. The Sudden Silence. And then, as mysteriously as the attacks had begun, they stopped. After October 1919, there were no more confirmed attacks by the Axeman. It was as if the killer had simply vanished, moving on from New Orleans to terrorize some other city, or perhaps dying, imprisoned, or losing interest in his violent pursuits. The sudden cessation of the attacks created even more questions than the crimes themselves. Had the killer been caught? Was he dead? Had he moved to another city? Had he simply decided to stop? With no clear answers, the case grew cold, filed away in police archives, where it would remain for decades. Part 8. Theories and Speculation. Over the years, numerous theories emerged about the identity of the Axeman. Some people pointed to specific individuals they believed were responsible. Others offered psychological profiles of the type of person who might commit such crimes. But none of these theories were ever proven. One theory suggested that the Axeman might have been a man with a grudge against specific businesses or individuals in New Orleans, and that the attacks were a form of twisted revenge. Another theory proposed that the killer was someone with deep-seated psychological issues, possibly stemming from childhood trauma or abuse. Some even suggested that the Axeman might have been a woman, a theory that was particularly controversial at the time. The cryptic letters provided some clues, but their interpretation remained subjective. The grammar and phrasing suggested someone with limited education, but it was possible the writer was intentionally disguising his or her true intelligence. The references to being a supernatural entity were either the rambling of a delusional mind or an elaborate hoax designed to frighten the population. Part 9. Modern Analysis. Modern criminologists have studied the case and attempted to apply contemporary forensic techniques and psychological profiling to the decades-old mystery. Some believe the killer was likely a local resident with an intimate knowledge of New Orleans geography and the layout of victims' homes. Others suggest he might have been a transient, someone passing through the city who committed the murders and then moved on. The brutality of the attacks suggests someone with significant rage and possibly a history of violence. The fact that he could move unseen and undetected suggests he was either extremely careful or had a level of familiarity with his victims' homes that allowed him to navigate them in darkness. The use of multiple weapons, the axe and the straight razor, suggests someone with access to sharp implements, someone who understood how to use them effectively. It also suggests a certain amount of premeditation and planning, at least in terms of weapon selection. The fact that some victims survived raises the question of why the axeman didn't finish them off. Was he interrupted? Did he lose nerve? Or did he deliberately allow some victims to live, perhaps to maximize the terror and fear in the city? Part 10. The Legacy of Terror. The Axeman of New Orleans killed an estimated 6 people, though some researchers believe the true number might be higher. He injured numerous others. More importantly, he left a city traumatized and forever changed. The case became legendary in criminal history circles. Books were written about it. Documentaries explored it. The mystery captivated the public imagination and contributed to the growing field of criminal psychology and forensic investigation. The Axeman case also contributed to New Orleans' mystique as a city of mystery and darkness. Combined with the city's existing reputation for voodoo, spirits, and supernatural phenomena, the case only deepened the perception of New Orleans as a place where darkness lurked just beneath the surface of civilization. For decades after the attacks ceased, New Orleans residents still locked their doors obsessively. They still told stories about the axemen to their children as a warning about the dangers of the night. The killer had achieved a kind of immortality through fear. Even though he was no longer actively killing, the terror he inspired lived on. Part 11. Unsolved and Forgotten. Today, more than 100 years later, the Axeman remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. No one has ever been definitively proven to be the killer. No one has ever confessed on a deathbed. No smoking gun has ever been discovered that definitively linked a specific person to the crimes. Various theories continue to circulate. Some people believe they know who the Axeman was. Others believe he was never caught and possibly died of old age, taking his secrets to the grave. Still others entertain the possibility that the Axeman was multiple people, different individuals, committing copycat crimes, and inspired by the original killer's legend. The case represents a dark chapter in New Orleans history, a period when an entire city was gripped by fear and uncertainty. It reminds us that even in our most civilized societies, darkness can emerge from unexpected places. It reminds us that sometimes, despite our best efforts, crimes go unsolved and killers escape justice. Part 12. The Enduring Mystery. What makes the Axeman case so captivating is not just the violence or the murders themselves, but the mystery that surrounds it. We don't know who he was. We don't know why he did what he did. We don't know if he was ever caught or if he simply disappeared back into the shadows from which he came. The letters he wrote are still preserved, still studied by investigators and criminologists, hoping to unlock secrets that have been hidden for over a century. The handwriting has been analyzed. The grammar has been parsed. But the true identity of the Axeman remains elusive. In some ways, the Axeman represents our deepest fears. He is the unknown danger lurking in the darkness. He is the killer who can strike without warning. He is the evil that we cannot predict or prevent. And the fact that he was never caught, that he was never brought to justice, somehow makes him even more terrifying. The Axeman of New Orleans remains one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries. A killer who emerged from darkness, committed brutal murders, taunted law enforcement with cryptic letters, and then vanished without a trace. More than 100 years later, we still don't know who he was or what happened to him. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of America's darkest chapters, please like and subscribe for more mysterious, chilling stories that will keep you up at night. And let us know in the comments, do you have a theory about the Axeman's identity? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and remember, keep your doors locked at night.